Groom of the Stool, Tudor, England. In the court of King Henry VI, there was a highly unusual job called the Groom of the Stool. The title sounds fancy, but the reality was that this servant's duty was to assist the king in the most private of moments, using the toilet. Their job was to help the monarch wipe, clean, and ensure everything about the king's bathroom routine went smoothly. As humiliating as it sounds, the role wasn't all bad. Because of the internet access, the Groom of the Stool became one of the king's most trusted advisors. They often held great political influence, but they also had to deal with the daily reality of human waste. Imagine trading power and wealth for a lifetime of toilet duty. Leech collector, medieval Europe. Leeches were thought to be a cure-all for a variety of ailments, ranging from headaches to fevers, prior to the advent of modern medicine. As a result of that, there was a demand for leech collectors, individuals who would harvest live leeches from marshes, ponds, and bogs. The procedure was as gruesome as they come. The leeches would attach themselves to the bare legs of the people collecting them until a sufficient number had been caught. The collectors would do this by wading into water that had not been flowing for some time. What is the issue that has to be addressed? Leeches have the potential to transmit diseases, and they create open sores. Additionally, continuous blood loss frequently left collectors feeling debilitated and unwell. A lot of them were left with lasting scars. All of that suffering was only in order to provide fuel for medieval medical cures that frequently proved to be ineffective. Fuller, ancient Rome. Roman clothing was made of wool, and cleaning it required a special process done by workers called fullers. Their job was to wash and bleach garments to keep them bright and wearable. The main problem? The detergent they used was human urine. Urine contains ammonia, which breaks down oils and stains, but the stench was unbearable. Fullers would stomp on piles of clothes soaked in tubs of urine, often spending hours ankle-deep in filth. Roman authorities even collected urine as a tax resource, proving how much the empire relied on this nasty industry. Rat catcher, Victorian England. Rats were a ubiquitous presence in England during the 19th century. They infested homes, crawled through the streets, and spread terrible diseases such as the plague. The rat catchers arrive, including both men and occasionally even children who are charged with the responsibility of tracking down vermin. In order to drive rats out of their hiding places, they carried basic implements such as sticks, bags, and terriers. On the other hand, the position was associated with a great deal of danger. Handling dozens of infected animals on a daily basis was essentially gambling with your life, since scratches and bites had the potential to spread infections. Although they were essential to the health of the general public, rat catchers were in continual danger of contracting the same diseases that they were working to eradicate. Treadmill operator, Victorian prisons. The treadwheel, often known as the prison treadmill, was developed by inmates in Victorian jails as a means of punishing them. Inmates were coerced into walking for a number of hours on large rotating wheels, which at times resulted in them climbing the equivalent of thousands of feet in only one day. Unlike contemporary exercise machines, the treadmill did not generate electricity. Rather than that, it sometimes worked grain mills or pumps, but more often than not, it was simply a meaningless form of punishment. The people who were incarcerated characterized it as laborious, soul-crushing, and demeaning. A lot of people passed out as a result of tiredness, and some people even died due to being forced to work for such an extremely long time. Tosher, 19th century London. Imagine wading into London sewers with nothing but a lantern and a rake. That was the life of a tosher. These men scavenged in the city's sewers, looking for coins, jewelry, or any valuables washed down from the streets above. The environment was foul beyond belief, knee-deep in human waste, choking on toxic sewer gases, and risking death from sudden floods of wastewater. Some toshers actually made good money, but they lived shorter lives due to infections, accidents, and exposure to poisonous fumes. Powder monkey, age of sail. On warships during the 17th and 18th centuries, cannons were the most important weapons. To keep them firing, crews relied on powder monkeys, often young boys who carried gunpowder from the ship's magazine to the cannons during battle. It was an incredibly dangerous role. Powder monkeys had to run across slippery decks, often under heavy fire, carrying explosive barrels that could detonate if hit by a spark. Many were killed instantly in naval battles, while survivors grew up with trauma from the horrors they witnessed. Resurrectionist, 18th–19th century. Medical schools in Europe once struggled to get enough bodies for anatomy classes. To meet demand, shady characters called resurrectionists, or body snatchers, dug up freshly buried corpses to sell to surgeons. This job was revolting, illegal, and extremely dangerous. Grave robbers worked at night, risking arrest or violent encounters with grieving families. Public anger was so strong that some cemeteries even installed metal cages over graves. Resurrectionists earned quick money, but at the cost of constant danger and public hatred. Knocker-up, industrial England. Before alarm clocks were common, factory workers needed a way to wake up early for long shifts. Enter the knocker-up. Their job was to walk the streets in the early morning and tap on bedroom windows with long sticks or even pea shooters to wake people up. It might sound harmless compared to other jobs on this list, but knocker-ups often worked in freezing weather, pouring rain, or in dangerous neighborhoods. They were poorly paid and had to keep odd hours, sometimes starting work at 3 a.m. just to make sure others got to work on time. Matchstick factory worker, 19th century. During the 19th century, employees, typically young women and children, performed laborious tasks at matchstick factories where matches were coated with white phosphorus. Initially, the severity of the situation was unknown to everyone. Phossy jaw is the name that the general public gave to the terrifying sickness that laborers developed over time. The jawbones of the individuals were corroded from within by the chemical, which led to deformity, infections, and, in the end, death. The condition was excruciating. There were incandescent abscesses that literally radiated light in the darkness. For decades, this was one of the most dangerous occupations in the industrial sector until the public outcry over the situation ultimately resulted in the adoption of safer chemicals. Tanner, medieval Europe. The process of transforming animal skins into usable leather was carried out by tanners. Nevertheless, the process was abhorrent. In order to soften skins, workers had to soak them in urine, lime, and sometimes dog or pigeon dung. Due to the fact that no one could tolerate living in close proximity to tanneries, these establishments were generally situated at a considerable distance from cities. A seemingly infinite number of health problems were induced by exposure to microorganisms, animal remains, and harsh chemicals. Those who worked as tanners frequently had short lifespans, and their occupation left them permanently dirty and ostracized. Despite this, the leather business was so ghastly that society put up with it since leather was such a precious commodity. Executioner across history. Finally, the position of executioner, which is among the most psychologically demanding positions. Executioners had the weight of ending lives as their vocation, whether they did so by beheading, hanging, or operating a guillotine. They were feared or avoided by the majority of people. Nevertheless, there were a few societies that held them in high regard. The life of executioners were frequently characterized by isolation, and they were detested on account of the very nature of the work for which they were compensated. In addition to the social humiliation, the psychological burden of taking another human life, again and over again, left deep, lasting wounds. Imagine being treated like an outsider for your profession, even though your job consists of administering justice. Final perspective. When we think back on these jobs, we can see how perilous and desperate life was in the past. People frequently suffered from dirt, disease, and humiliation, often merely for the sake of their own survival. These positions truly constitute some of the most horrible occupations in history. They range from wading through sewers to carrying bombs in war to treading in urine to handling corpses.